Welcome to the Off Peak. I'm Martin Romjue, editor of Charged Fleet. Today we explore what is so far considered a rare fleet operation, an all-electric rental car company. We recently found one called Drive Joulez, which rents out a diverse fleet of EVs in New York and Los Angeles. Owner and founder Micah Bergdale has managed to make it all work, despite the difficulties some car renters and rental fleets have encountered with EVs in recent years. Micah, welcome to Charged Fleet.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So just wanted to start off, you obviously run a unique rental operation focused only on EVs. Give us some background on your rental fleet services and your operations.
Yeah, back in 2021, we saw an opening within the marketplace as Teslas and EVs more generally started to rise in popularity. There were more and more people who owned these cars that also preferred to rent them when they were going on various different trips. In the New York City market, where we're based out of, you also have a lot of people who don't necessarily own a car at all. And so they're just looking for kind of the best option to be able to do a rental car around New York City and for regional road trips. So we decided to start with a handful of Teslas and eventually grew that into a fleet of Rivians and Lucids. We have Cadillac and Chevy, a mixture of kind of anything and everything you could imagine, and have really been able to grow that quite nicely. We ended up having an opportunity as well through our investment partner out in Los Angeles to be able to work in that region. And so we expanded out there. And that ultimately led us for both markets into working with the film and TV production industry, which has been a phenomenal partnership for us as we've been able to, offer these it's on a corporate level. And I'm sure if you talk to anybody in the rental car market, they'll tell you that the B2B corporate market is really the best part of being able to run this business. It's stable income, less likelihood to have fraud and accidents and the various different challenges that come with this industry. So I've been really happy to be able to expand into that.
Now, what gave you the initial idea? What was it that said you're just going to go all electric as opposed to doing a mixed fleet?
So the most honest answer is I'm a bit of a nerd and I love technology. So my background, I started working at Apple as an engineer many years ago, and then had a software company that I had started and sold focused on transportation related solutions. And really saw EVs not just as a new way of being able to fuel charge a car, but actually computers on wheels. And because of that and the integration that happens with that, I really wanted to develop software that directly integrated with these vehicles, which is a big part of what we've done as a company, to take our own custom software and utilize APIs from these different car manufacturers, to be able to monitor things like charge level, battery life cycle, any issues that you might end up seeing with the battery, what's the retained value of the vehicle, including the charge life of the battery. Kind of unique questions that don't necessarily get applied to ICE cars, and trying to kind of think about that holistically in terms of how we ended up supporting that fleet and hopefully taking this technology and offering it up to other companies that decide to have EVs in their fleets.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned you have Chevrolets, Teslas, Rivians. There's obviously a lot of choices out there. So, how did you choose the right mix and the right balance of EV models?
It's a great question. So I think one of the things to start with, Tesla was really kind of the go-to resource because they dominated the market. There were more charging stations for Tesla. So it just made it easier for people to be able to not only rent the car, but know where to charge the car because it just provided this integrated solution. What has shifted over the course of the past few years is that NACS, which is the charging adapter that's used for Teslas, has now been carried over to all of the other EV manufacturers. And so, as more and more have adopted that as the standard that's both built into the car or adapted to the car, it makes it that much easier because whether you're driving a Rivian or a Lucid, they can charge at a Tesla charger. And I will say, if you've ever gone out and charged a car, NACS is definitely easier than the CCS, which is a little bit big and bulky and, a little bit more challenging to be able to plug into the car. So we found that that adoption has allowed us to be able to be more flexible in terms of the types of vehicles that we have, because I think it's less about the brand and more about the convenience of charging for a lot of people that are renting with us. And they want to know that there's just easy access to be able to plug in a car, charge it, and go. And that's really what the Tesla supercharging solutions offer is
Hmm.
that capability, regardless of whether you're in a Rivian or a Lucid, that you just plug in the car, it recognizes the car, charges it back to your account, and you're able to be off on your way. So that's a big part of really how we kind of thought about the very first vehicles that we brought in. And then as that's become a standard that's been carried over through all these different vehicles, being more flexible about the fleet mix that we're doing, and then just trying to gauge, what vehicles are most popular with customers too. There's definitely been a shift within the marketplace away from Tesla towards some of the other brands and being able to kind of match that demand with the mix of vehicles that we put into our fleet.
Hmm. Now, I know from circulating among rental car operators, they don't all necessarily see EVs as profitable. And of course, we already all know about the Hertz pullback from a few years ago.
Yep.
So, how do you determine your rental rates and make a profit on these EV rentals?
So it's a great question. One of the things that really has shifted for us from a buying standpoint is that we've been buying lightly used within the past 1 to 2 year model year EVs directly from the car auction market in order to put them into our rental mix. You have a lot of Rivians, Lucids that have come up off of their leases that have been taken back that are actually sold at auction and they're in great condition. They may have 10, 15,000 miles on them, so plenty of bandwidth to be able to put them on the road. We've also seen, just as it relates to an EV on the road versus an ICE car on the road, that people are more comfortable with higher mileage vehicles than they necessarily would be with a traditional gas car because they just tend to have less of a breakdown issue. And so they are pretty reliable even when they get up into the 50, 60, 70,000 mile range. Now, once it hits 100,000 miles, we do obviously look to defleet that, but it's a little bit more flexible in terms of what we're able to do and for the amount of miles that we're able to put onto the car. But by having that heaviest depreciation hit taken off of the vehicle by buying them lightly used at auction, it allows us to be able to make the unit economics work a lot better.
You mentioned you work with entertainment industry companies,
Yep.
especially in LA. So give us a profile of your customer base. How many are business corporate versus local residents who need a car versus
Yep.
tourists and travelers?
So right now we're actually at about 60% B2B.
Hmm.
Netflix is one of our main partners. It's funny you made a mention about being in Los Angeles in the film industry. I know that's what a lot of people have in their mindset, but it's a lot shifted to New York. I mean, New York
Hmm.
just has a ton of demand. They've built a new film production studio that's in New Jersey. There's a huge one that's here in New York City. So more and more it is actually getting filmed in the Northeast and non-Southern California locations. So we've just seen a lot of demand within this region in particular, but it's about 60% that's being B2B, with the film TV production industry being a huge part of that.
And for those customers who are not as familiar with EVs as the typical ones, if they're going from if they live in New York and they go to LA and they're not as familiar with LA, how do you connect car renters with EV chargers and give them that security that they can pretty much go to the right places at the right time?
Yeah, I mean, I will say the built-in infotainment systems that these cars have
Hmm.
really do a phenomenal job of being able to connect people up with the local chargers. I've rented EVs in Europe, for example.
Hmm.
I have to say it was a challenging experience driving an EV in Europe. Once you kind of figured out where things were and how that was set up there, it became a little bit easier, but it definitely was not as easy as the US. I will say that, just the types of cars that we're talking about, again, Tesla, Rivian, Lucid, GM based cars, so Chevy and Cadillac, their built-in infotainment systems make it very easy to find a local charger that you're able to just plug into and go and build that into your trip planning. And I
Hmm.
think what's really, really interesting is you look at AI getting integrated actually into chip planning for some of these cars, is that as Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid, and all of them are upgrading their built-in system, that you're able to actually have a really interesting kind of mix. So I saw there was a stream that I saw just the other day with Rivian's CSO, Chief Software Officer, and he was talking about the fact that you can have an AI conversation where it's like, hey, I need to find a charging location, but I want to find a charging location that's next to a Starbucks so I can go to the Starbucks, I can have my cup of coffee, I can go to the bathroom. and actually kind of like building that in so you're not like trying to poke around on the screen and be like, all right, there's a charging there, but does it have like the amenity that I want to have next to it? Or am I
Hmm.
kind of stuck in the middle of nowhere in terms of the charging? And you're starting to see a more comprehensive solution around like where the charger is at and what are the things that are around that charger that would allow you, because as we all know, it takes more than just a few minutes to necessarily charge a car. So if I want to grab a meal, I want to take a restroom break, maybe there's a shopping center that I want to go to, that I can actually build that into the search functionality and have that as part of just a conversational AI with any of the infotainment systems.
Hmm. Now, looking at your fleet, how many of your rentals are related to the luxury brands versus the more common standard ones?
It's a gray area where you define luxury too, because a lot of people who've been in a Tesla would say that that is not necessarily a luxury car. I
Hmm.
would probably be one of them, honestly. Not trying to throw shade at Tesla, but it does feel a little bit more cheaply made than, say, a Lucid or a Rivian, which I would categorize as being more of a luxury brand. And so, we really try to make sure that the Teslas are offered up in more kind of an economy car style. I have traveled, I go to Chicago pretty often, for example, and I will rent EVs when I'm there. And I've definitely found that they will price the Teslas as if they are a luxury vehicle.
Hmm.
And to me, that feels a little off in terms of, where the pricing of the vehicles are also at too. We're able to get many of these Tesla Model Ys and 3s in the upper 20,000, lower $30,000 range. And so, given that price point, you kind of treat that as an economy or economy plus kind of car, not
Hmm.
necessarily a luxury brand.
So, do you have the electric Ferrari yet?
We do not have an electric
Okay.
Ferrari. We do have a Taycan though that we've actually recently done on a B2B opportunity, which is kind of exciting. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's definitely a good mix. When you look back at the 5 years since you started the company, what are some lessons you've learned in launching an all EV rental service?
Well, some of it is also based off of what we saw with Hertz too, which is don't go and commit to a bunch of brand new cars. Um,
Hmm.
I think the market is changing so quickly that you really should consider having, again, lightly used. It's not like you have, beaters that you're going to put into your fleet, but vehicles that are fresh off of leases where the OEMs are looking to offer them up at a discounted price and, having that kind of into your pricing mix. A lot of these cars, for most people, it's still new technology. So even though it might have 10, 15,000 miles on it, for them, it still feels like a really high tech, new type of experience. So you worry a little bit less about the fact that it isn't necessarily brand new, and therefore you're able to get a heavier discount on the car. And it honestly makes the fleet economics work a lot better.
Hmm. So, what would you advise fleet managers, not just rental fleet managers, but anyone who is either about to launch an electric fleet or is considering it, especially given all the pros and cons that we've learned about in the last few years?
The other thing I would also throw in there, and this comes from my background working at Apple in particular, and anybody that is in the United States and has walked into an Apple store, you kind of know that concierge level of experience where you're able to engage with somebody and get more of an in-depth experience of the technology. I do think we need to start thinking about these cars as computers on wheels and that they
Hmm.
require a little bit more of a white glove hand-holding engagement. Not everybody is going to be coming into a situation in the garage where they've driven a Tesla before, they've driven one of the different EVs. And because of the unique experience that's required with that, and again, it's not requiring you to spend, an hour because that would obviously just destroy your unit economics too. But a 5, 10 minute, even if it was a downloadable YouTube video clip, which we've actually sent to customers too, to say, hey, if you're not familiar with this car, watch this video. We have somebody over here that can also answer a few basic questions for you because people just want to be comfortable getting in the car and not feel like the experience is so foreign that they're scared to actually drive it anywhere.
Hmm. All right. Well, I know there's a lot more we could talk about here, but it's all the time we have, and certainly thank you for your insights today.
Get it. Thank you so much.
And you can learn more about Drive Jules at his rental company website, drivejules.com, which we'll have at the bottom of the screen. And as usual, you will find coverage of all matters electric vehicles on chargefleet.com. For today, I'm Martin Romjue, and I hope to see you again soon here on another episode of The Off Peak.